This is part 2 of the Chapter 8 lecture notes. And we had covered, for cellular respiration, we had covered glycolysis and the prep reaction and the citric acid cycle. And so now, and we also covered fermentation. And now we're going to cover the last phase of cellular respiration, which is the electron transport chain. All right, let me get the slideshow set up. And, oops. Okay, so the electron transport chain, I don't know if you remember from the last recording, but we're kind of keeping track of how many ATP molecules are produced at each step. And in glycolysis, 2 ATP molecules were produced. The prep reaction didn't produce any. And then the citric acid cycle produced another 2. So the electron transport chain is going to produce anywhere from 32 to 34 ATP molecules. The electron transport chain occurs in the mitochondria. And what it is a series of carrier molecules. Some are proteins, but they are carrier molecules, and the electrons come from the NADH and FADH2 molecules that were built up in the previous phases. So the electron transport chain receives its electrons from NADH and FADH2. These are produced, NADH is produced in all the phases, so glycolysis, the prep reaction, and the citric acid cycle produces NADH, but only the citric acid cycle produces FADH2. And then the electron transport chain produces ATP by a process called oxidative phosphorylation. And the final electron acceptor molecule is oxygen. What happens, what happens is oxygen combines with hydrogen ions and electrons to form water. So actually water is formed or produced during the electron transport chain. Okay, and so basically let's look at a picture first. The source of the electrons is going to be the hydrogen atoms that are attached to NADH and FADH2. So NADH is broken down, hydrogen ions are released, and you see hydrogen ions accumulating inside the mitochondria. And then electrons are also released. And this one electron is going to be passed from carrier to carrier to carrier. And the flow of electrons, that flow of charge, is going to release energy in the form of electricity. And that energy will be used to pump hydrogen out of this membrane. Okay? This is the inner mitochondrial membrane. So hydrogen ions are pumped out of that membrane into this space is called the intermembrane space. It's going to be, if you look over here at the mitochondria, it's going to be the space between the inner membrane and the outer membrane. It's called the intermembrane space. So hydrogen ions accumulate outside of this membrane. And then when they encounter ATP synthase, they're going to diffuse back in from where their concentration is high to where it's low. And the diffusion of hydrogen ions provides the energy to attach a phosphate to ADP, producing ATP. So that is how the electron transport chain works, and we'll go back and make sure you get the notes for it. The electron transport chain pumps hydrogen ions from the matrix of the mitochondria into the intermembrane space. And then ATP synthase allows hydrogen ions to flow down its concentration gradient back into the matrix of the mitochondria. That is going to drive the synthesis. The flow of hydrogen ions is going to drive the synthesis of ATP through the enzyme ATP synthase. This entire process is called chemiosmosis. The chemiosmosis part is the formation of the hydrogen ion gradient. So chemiosmosis is going to be the part where the hydrogen ions are pumped out and then they diffuse back in. That's the chemiosmosis part. It would be osmosis if it were the diffusion of water, but we call it chemiosmosis because it's the diffusion of a different chemical besides water. It's the diffusion of hydrogen ions. And now, as far as the number of ATP molecules that are produced, we already said that glycolysis gives us 2 ATPs. The citric acid cycle gives us 2 more. And the electron transport chain gives us 32 or 34 ATPs. And this makes aerobic cellular respiration 39% energy efficient. And this is a summary. In this summary, it shows you how many ATPs are produced from the NADHs and the FADH2s. So if you look, glycolysis is going to produce 2 ATPs directly and then 2 NADH molecules. Those will be used to produce either 4 or 6 ATP molecules. And then the 2 NADH molecules produced in the prep reaction will produce 6 ATPs in the electron transport chain. The 6 NADH molecules from the citric acid cycle are going to produce 18 ATPs. So you may notice that for every NADH, each NADH will produce 3 ATPs during the electron transport chain. And then for the 2 FADH2 molecules that are produced in the citric acid cycle, we get 4 ATPs. So when you add all the ATPs up, the 2 from glycolysis, the 2 from the citric acid cycle, and then the 32 or 34 from the electron transport chain, that's where you get the 36 to 38 ATP molecules. Okay, the section on metabolism, section 8.5 on metabolism, is going to cover breakdown reactions or degradative reactions, which are called catabolism. They are the breakdown reactions. They tend to release energy and be exergonic. And then the synthesis reactions are called anabolism, and they tend to be endergonic. They require energy. So when we eat food like this pizza, we have this metabolic pool concept, and that means that when we eat food, the proteins and carbohydrates and fats are broken down in our digestive system. And then components from this breakdown are going to enter the cellular respiration at some point. They might enter glycolysis, they might enter the prep reaction, or sometimes like amino acids can enter the citric acid cycle directly. But basically, the breakdown products from proteins, carbohydrates, and fats are going to enter the cellular respiration at some point and be used to produce ATP. We tend to learn cellular respiration from the standpoint of glucose, but it's not always glucose. Sometimes it's amino acids and sometimes it's fatty acids. Okay, catabolism are all the breakdown reactions in the body. Glucose is broken down in cellular respiration. Fat breaks down into glycerol and fatty acid. Amino acids break down into carbon chains and amino groups. There's a process that occurs in the liver called deamination, and that's where the amino group, the NH2 amino group, is removed from the amino acid, and it results in the in poisonous ammonia, which is converted to urea and released in our urine. Anabolism are all of the synthesis reactions, all of the reactions that build larger molecules. So we need carbohydrates, we need fats, we need proteins. Our body structure needs these molecules, and carbohydrates form those carbohydrate chains on the surface of our cells, those glycolipids and glycoproteins. Um, we need fats. There are certain hormones that are fats, and we need proteins. There are certain hormones and certain amino acids that are proteins. So what I'm going to tell you about now are the amino acids that make up proteins. So there are 20 total amino acids. There are 20 different types of amino acids. Some of those amino acids we get, our body can actually make. So there's 11 of those amino acids that can be synthesized by adult humans. And most of those are synthesized in the liver. But there's 9 amino acids that we have to get in our diet because our body cannot synthesize them. And those are called essential amino acids. And it's important to understand where we can get those essential amino acids in our diet. If we're people who are omnivores, that means that we eat meat and vegetables, then we will get the essential amino acids that we need. We'll get all 9 just by eating meat or just by eating eggs or drinking milk. And vegetarians can even get all 9 essential amino acids by drinking milk or eating cheese, dairy products. But there are people who have diets, special diets like vegans. Vegans are going to have to be real careful to get a combination of a grain and a legume. A grain like rice and a legume like beans. And the word legume is this, legume. So a legume plus a grain would give a vegan all 9 essential amino acids. So that is the reason that vegans tend to eat rice and beans a lot. All right, let's see what else we have. There is a comparison here between photosynthesis and cellular respiration, since we covered photosynthesis in Chapter 7. So the similarities between photosynthesis and cellular respiration are that the membranes of the chloroplast and the mitochondria. So if you remember the electron transport chain in photosynthesis, it is located on thylakoid membranes. And then in mitochondria, the electron transport chain is located on the cristae of the mitochondria, which is the inner membrane of the mitochondria. All right, and then this is just showing you an illustration of a chloroplast versus the mitochondria. Both of them have a double membrane structure. The inner membrane of the mitochondria is called cristae, and it's folded into these little structures called cristae. The electron transport chain happens on the inner membrane of the mitochondria and in cellular respiration. And in photosynthesis, the electron transport chain happens on the thylakoid membrane. And the only other thing is that in photosynthesis, the final electron acceptor is NADPH, and in cellular respiration, the final electron acceptor is oxygen. And we will end there with our Chapter 8 recordings.